your band and your project?
Okay. Yeah, the project is an ongoing research on history and influences of music by Mexican American musicians. We're focusing, the last expedition in September is going to be on Austin musicians. But what led me to this whole thing is that I did a project in California where I discovered and found this now information. To more detail, there's a handout that I have there that it'll give you some and points of reference to some of the things that I do talk about. If you visit those sites, you will become more familiar with it. Because I have this thing about he who writes the history, you know, is their interpretation. And so what with our culture, Mexican American, our history goes back to the Spanish and it extends it back to the indigenous. And so when we talk about the Spanish, we say, well, wait a minute, before the Spanish, the indigenous people were here, the Native Americans, right? And now a border has come across, and now the people from Mexico are called los indígenas, or la indígena, and this is called the Native Americans, right? Well, it's the same thing. So when I study the research of the Native Americans and the indigenous people of Mexico, it's the same thing. They have the same, you know, the cibulo, the buffalo, the rivers, everything, you know. And so, so the first thing, this first song is called a borrego, right? One of the borregos it's a sheep, okay? That's one of the things that was here that kind of conflicted with the cattle. Because people say, well, how did the sheep conflict with the cattle? Well, it's because the sheep, when they eat the grass, they eat all of it. They eat all the roots and everything. Cattle, and so the cattlemen didn't like that, you know. So there was always a split, and you see all those cowboy movies what me and Larry were discussing. The movies have all of this stuff, but if you don't know the orientation to it, you're just going to look at the movie for all the superficial thing. All the shooting, the cowboy, they kill the Indian, the cowboy killed the Indian, or the Indian raped the woman, and it's all that, you know, it's all that. Borrego, this song, is a rendition of a song because in Spain, when the Spanish came over, they had they're spreading their Christianity. That's what they were doing. They wanted to secure the land from Mexico. That's why they brought the church, the mission system. And when you study Spain, you find out, well, what was the music? The music was the opera, Spanish opera, which was called zarzuelas, right? And then the first one, and the reason the Italians didn't accept the zarzuela, because in the Italian opera they sang through the whole piece. They didn't nasalize. They didn't use quarter tones or polytones, or which is very evident in indigenous music, and so then in Spain they had the zarzuela where you would sing and then you would stop in dialogue, and that was a no-no. So the Italians didn't like what the Spanish did. Well, those zarzuelas came over here. One of the guys that started was a guy named Juan Encina, and he started this movement on the music, and the first thing I hear is imagine the land the way it used to be, and then the Spanish come across with their doing this kind of stuff. Señora, su borreguito me quiere llevar al Encina started what was called a pastoral song, so that was what that was. So we're going to do it one more time.
and being tempted. So you listen, there's a play called La Pastorela, and in the Pastorela there's a guy named Cucharon, and Cucharon is out there, and he gets, and what it is, it's a shepherd's play where they're going to Bethlehem to see the baby Jesus. And so Cucharon, when he's out there by himself, tending the sheep, who shows up and tries to tempt him to, telling him, hey man, you can be this, and you can be this, and you can be the owner of all these sheep. Well, that's what that song's about. It's not, and so that's what the emphasis of that is, okay, on that song, whatever. Now, so as we go on, then the missionaries, they weren't too happy with the Spanish. If you study the history in Alcala and San Diego, they burned the mission twice. The indigenous people did not appreciate it. They were burning the mission. And then I heard that, weren't you the one that was telling me about that the first mission was here in 1713? 31.
Bye.
First mission was in 1731. So who's heard of that, right?
Right.
And then you find out they went to San Antonio, Valero, right? There's also, how did the ones in Goliad get there? And those are the La Bahia and all this stuff. But anyway, so it's the same thing, right? And all they were trying to do was trying to encroach to stop the encroachment by the French. That's what they didn't want. Let me get my thought. Okay, so this next song is called Los Camotes. And Los Camotes is the first satire written by the Native Americans. Let me see if I can get it. What key did we do it? E? C? It's an A. San Francisco se va a montar y tan se comieron un camote. Okay, now saying the nuns ate a camote. So when you find, so when you hear when you see the rest part of it, the rest of it is really a satire because it says, les hizo tanto daño, it was so bad for them that they went que se fueron andar a trote. Andar a trote means, I think it means rapidly, so apparently it upset their stomach. So it's the first satire that was done. So every So now you have the camotes, right? And so now they're making fun of the missionaries. So now we're starting to see, and you're saying to yourself, well, what was happening? Well, what was happening was that they were starting to lose respect for the missions, because the missions were like the standard. And the Native Americans weren't too happy with that. So then what started by 1824, the mission system was abolished in Mexico, the new constitution, because of obviously with Spain, so they stopped the mission system, and so all the missions began to deteriorate. So before the people that came over, they also had the presidios were built. The soldiers had come along to protect the missionaries and stuff like that. So the order was that no one could start a township. You know, you had to live off the soldiers' wages if the soldier brought his family. And so you couldn't start a city or a town. Well, after the mission system went out, then they started doing they started to create little towns and started, making money and stuff like that. This next song is called Sombrero Blanco. Sombrero Blanco is a song about that was used in the movie with Tyrone Power in 1941, and it was the creation of Zorro. And so it's a myth, okay? It's a myth. All of a sudden Hollywood creates Zorro, just like Hollywood created John Wayne and the Alamo, And so we're gonna have this part right here. What can you do? See? So this was the beginning of the Spanish and kind of like a rendition of, when I studied the thing and I saw the music and I heard the interpretation, I didn't hear this feel. Well, because the people that recorded it, if you look at that research, they recorded it, or interpretation from 1904, who was also Charles Lummis, who also recorded what one of the descendants did from the 1800s. So when I heard the song and then I saw it in music form, and I said, that's not the way the waltzes go, that I know, that are Mexican. So then this is the part where we put our own rendition of the nuances. All of a sudden, we begin to affect you. You can hear the changes there. All the music is really interesting, because in music, the music verses and the music songs usually follow the movement, or the movement of a pattern, right? Most of the corridos, when you listen to corridos, they go from the 1 to the 5. Okay, that means from the first movement to the second movement. but it goes from the 1 to the 5. In Spanish, they call it, in Mexican, Mexicano, they call it primera to the segunda. Normally, when you listen to country western music, it goes from the 1 to the 4. That dictates the melody of why the songs sound that way. So you can distinguish a song that's country western and a song that's Mexican by the form of it. And so when I heard this song is a bolero, it's bolero blanco, but it's a dance, okay? And it's, I want you to put on my white hat, I want you to put my blue hat, it's a competition. So, this is the second verse. And what he's talking about is building a bridge across the river. And what was the bridge made out of? It's made out of cement or the bricks, right? And they make and in the verse when I saw this verse here, I said, well, what's cal and what's lancha? Well, cal is the lime. That's what they used to make bricks with. And so lancha is a boat, right? So here's the verse. So now you're starting to hear that, and when you look at the song, when I started looking at it, I started thinking, well, 1841, or 1941, they're depicting something during the Mexican-American War, Zorro, blah, blah, blah. So I said 1836, 1839, 1840. And this is where you start to find a lot of the stuff when you go like, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Well, there was here in Texas, the Republic of Texas, 1836 to 1846. So it's building up to what? It's building up towards the Mexican-American War. You also had the French coming in. So there was this conflict between the Spanish and the French. The Spanish didn't like the French. So you hear that in songs like Elena y el Francés, and so because the French were moving in, and the military is a big buildup. This next song is called Las Blancas Flores. So now there seems like the tide is changing, the style is changing, and this is a song called Las Blancas Flores. Let me get it right here. Yeah. Now this was written by one of the informants of Lummis. And these informants were descendants of the families
that were on the last expedition. So that's why when you listen to, you're gonna go to those sites and you're gonna listen to Los Californios do the rendition, but the Californios don't. The songs are good. I like the songs. At least they brought them out. But you know, when you look at the songs, it gets into another question. There's things, to me, there's things that are questionable. But that's me. So you look at it and you make a determination. But the idea is just to get it and understand that this life existed. And when you watch these movies, these old movies, and they bring out the Spanish and the way they dress, you know, like when they have those hats, and then they say, well, they got the little beagle balls, and then they got the chaps, and so you start to look at, well, wait a minute, what is that? Right? So then you're watching a movie like this is what I heard with this thing. It was called. Well, okay, I'll get to that part in a minute. Okay, so this is called Las Blancas Flores, and let me see. Las blancas flores nacen de América, pero por ellas muero de amor. Pasión de mi amor que quiero, escucha mis lamentos, muero por ti, muero de amor, no de sentimiento, y de mi vida cantando, yo siempre te adoraré, en el amor y calor, cuánta gran programación, Okay, now, Las Blancas Flores, they nacen de amores. These white flowers are born with, out of love. And they're so beautiful that I'll die for you. I'll die for this love, you know. So, anyway, so this now starts to show a rendition of, the happy life, the happy ranch life. And so you start to think of, well, okay, what was that? Okay, the songs like this were sung only in family gatherings. And they were called bailes. And so the home, and it would be where the daughter, would sing, the female would sing, they could only sing in a family gathering. They couldn't sing out in public. They could only sing in these gatherings. And so they were called bailes. Now, you say, well, that's a dance. What's a dance? We have a different interpretation of what a dance is. But back there was baile, was more respectful. The men, after the baile, would attend the fandango. That would mean that there was a place away from the baile, because if the music got too loud or boisterous at the baile, where the families were at, and of course they didn't dare bring the accordion, because the accordion was of the lower classes. And so it was all sung and everything was calm. The minute it got loud, then the party's over, right? Or the baile is over. And then the men would go to the city, right? And so, and then that's where it describes by, of course, some of the writers happen to be European, and they would say, well, the fandangos were in these places where you would go into a place that was dark and dim lit, and women of ill repute would be in the corners smoking cigarettes, right? So apparently it's to the public. What they're talking about is the whole cantina thing, right? And then not only that is the public. The public was not the family. So there's a difference between fandango and baile. And now you see, hey man, let's all go to the fandango. Well, it's actually, if you go back in time, fandango was not a respectable place or a respectable experience. So anyway, then so the things began to change. 1840 is leading up to the thing with the Spanish, the French are coming in to build up the ranchos, and now the people, they abolished, like remember I told you earlier, they abolished the system. So they abolished the system, and then all of a sudden Mexico started giving out land, and they gave it out by the hordes. As a matter of fact, when you think of, what's that town in, there's a town near LA, okay, there's the University of Irvine. University of Irvine was actually a rancho that was granted to a family. Okay, there's thousands of acres, okay? So it was so big that they would have what they would call fights, a competition between a bear and a bull. I mean, that's how the bears were running wild. And I mean, it's like, and so anyway, so these ranchos were so big, and so people that were European would start to come in, they started settling, they would settle away in the back, and they start homesteading, they were squatters and stuff like that. Nobody could do anything, so eventually they took over the land, but that's how all that was. And so these ranchos, it had these people, and things were going on, and the ranchos and the Californios are pretty real good about themselves, because they got all this land, all this cattle and sheep, and they got everything. But here comes the Europeans, right? And as the Europeans are coming out, this was the happy life. And all of a sudden, here comes the cattle, right? So this next song is called El Capotín. Capotín is a song about it's a cake, okay? It's a cake made out of palm leaves. It's protected the vaquero from the cold. Because you see the capotín, you see the leather capes and all that. Well, the vaqueros have. Okay, so you start to see the cowboy moves, then you start to say, well, okay, the cowboys, they said buckaroo. I said, well, okay, well, then I read, and this is where the part starts with, well, this is it my interpretation, but this is something that I read, right? And we go to those sites and those books, you'll probably find some of the things that lead up to it. The word buckaroo came from the word. The Europeans could not pronounce vaquero because they were the first cowboys. The vaquero was a cowboy. The Europeans could not say vaquero, so they started using the word buckaroo. So they called it, and so now the word is standard. Hey, buckaroo! Then you have, what's his name? The guy from California. Buck coins and the buckaroos, right? So those become standard. The other one was that there's actually a song, and when you go to those sites, you're going to see it's called the Dally Welter. Okay, the Dally Welter is a roping technique, and a roping technique that the cowboy or the vaquero would use when he lasso a calf to bring it down. A lariat with the rope, la lariat, which was not the lariat, la riata, right? So it's now called a lariat. He would rope the cattle, and so the calf would not pull him off the horse. He'd get on his saddle horn. He would wrap the lariata around the saddle horn, so that way when the calf would pull, he wouldn't pull the vaquero off. He would pull off he'd have to pull the horse and it was kind of hard. Well, there's a song, and his song says. He said, well, the cowboy was out there, with the lariat, and he roped that cattle, but he was a greenhorn because he didn't have his Dally Welter on. And so the calf yanked him off the horse. So he starts making fun of the guy. Well, saying, when you further read the story, well, the word Dally Welter comes from the Spanish word dale vuelta, which means give it a turn. So that's what that's the Dally Vuelta. So but the Cowboys call it the Dally Welter. See, so that's why one of the things is when we start to look at things in here, and one of the things we were discussing, and we had a little workshop where Alan came and spoke to us, and they said, oh, there's that name, Dario, right? And it's like, there's a restaurant over here. Did you call it Dario's? It's not Dario's, but of course, if pronounced in English without that accent, it is Dario's. But if you put that as Dario, right? And the R sounds like a D, right? So so you start to see that. This is why some of us that are of age, and we don't want to age ourselves here, but you go to GPS, what does Guadalupe say?
turn on Guadalupe, right? Or Manchac, or it just goes on and on, right? So this is one of the things that a lot of people said, well, but wait a minute, what's the word with Chicanx and Latinx and, well, what it is, what I think it is the accommodation for people. People are what they recognize. It's in every culture, right? The African Americans have the same thing, and you know, when you say, you don't say boy, right? And I was like, my grandson his dad is black, and his mom's Mexican. So I told him one time, I said, hey, don't let nobody call you boy. And he was quiet. He had no idea. He wasn't raised in the South, right? So then you study further on that, on the black community. It's just an example. This is an extra. In the black community, in the 1940s, they started the word man. Right? Hey man, hey what's up man? So now everybody says it, right? Hey man, what's going on? Hey man, hey brother, hey brother. Well, the word man started in the 40s in Harlem to break the stigma of being called a boy. We wanted everybody to recognize themselves. So that's what the African Americans did with their culture, in their culture. And this is what one of the things that we're bringing up right here is trying to do the same thing with our culture. Is show some of the things that, wait a minute, that's not the way you say it. And you don't have to say it, in a vulgar way, or you just present it in a certain way. You can do this through the arts. This is what I think. This next song is called the Capatín. Now this is the first thing that I got when I heard the song, right? I was talking about a cowboy or a vaquero that's he's a suitor. He's singing to his woman, and there's an old tale that says when a vaquero would go in front of a building and sing to the woman in front of the balcony, but there was no woman there. She was in her room, and he would sing the song. Now remember that capotín is that cape that the vaqueros would use now. So what if the cape was good for out there in the cold and all that? Well, if he's up there singing for the, keep it going. If he's singing to the woman, the tradition was that if she lit the candle, she accepted her suitor. If she lit the candle, she accepted her suitor. That's been a tradition. I've seen that in movies now, right? The guys all trying to see if she lights a candle, she accepts the suitor. So I have this thing that says if she doesn't light the candle, then he's going to need his cup of tea. He's going to be there all night. He's not going to give up.
Maestra
So, again, adaptation, English, Spanish to English, because we always look at, and I was looking at Freddie Pender's work, he did a lot of Spanish to English. A lot of English to Spanish on the country western song. So, I'm working on something here. Okay, so then now, so we started to look at 1846, the Vaquero, people coming in, Mexican-American War. And also here come the Europeans. What key we have, Susana? See? See if you recognize the song. See, it's up, like a ranchero. La Susana se paseaba en un buque de vapor, y la volteaba y lloraba. Ay, Susana, no llores por mí, yo te voy para California a traer oro para ti. So now you start to see the Californios mixing the English and the Spanish, and so you have renditions of that. That's actually from the 1800s, right? And then, so then we're going to attempt this, right? This is then the song. What key was that in that? What's over here? You see? You want to do it just the guitar? Just do it with the guitar. And I'll hum it.
Is it a orchestra?
Yeah, I'll do it with orchestra. Okay, so now all of a sudden the war breaks out. 1846, 1848. They started to sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. 9 days before the treaty was signed, gold was discovered in California. So the population grew from 20,000 to 200,000. It was the largest migration in the world. And so you had people coming from all over. And so then people started moving in to California. The first miners, and this is in the research in the Encyclopedia of Mexico, the first miners were Mexican. But because of the whole stigma on getting rid of the Mexicans and all this stuff, and war and all that, they were pushed out. So you say to yourself, well, what's the proof? Well, there's a song called El Corrido de Joaquín Murrieta, which I'm not going to do, but I mean, if you go on there, the Corrido de Joaquín Murrieta, there's tales of it, there's stories of that after the head of Joaquín Murrieta. Well, why Joaquín Murrieta? Joaquín Murrieta was a Mexican. There's a corrido about him that spoke English and he spoke Spanish. And what happened was that he was a gold miner, and what they did was they jumped his claim and they killed his brother. They raped him and killed his wife, his kids, and killed the kids too, and stuff like that. So he was a little angry. So there's a book, it's called Mexican Ballads or Mexican Heroes, and it shows all of the people. When you look at the book and start bringing up people like Caminar, Juan Cortina, Cabucho Vázquez, Joaquín Murrieta. All of these are to the Mexican heroes because they fought for the rights of people. Of course, because it was suppression by the European powers and all that, or the U.S. powers, because of the war, they would run out. So then, all of a sudden, then you start to get UCC, right? Okay. So then you start to hear songs like this, and it's really interesting because I'm not trying to put this person down. I did an event in Indianola when I came back from California, and I learned this song called La Varsoliana. And I asked this guy to come and do this. He was a specialist on accordion, right? And he came and gave a talk, and he said, and then there's this song. They call it "Put Your Little Foot In." But it's called "Put Your Little Foot." And I listened. I didn't really said that. But see, but people lose the essence of where these songs come from. So Marianna, what I look at is that French or is that Russian? Right? So they're, well, okay. And I'm still trying to think that, well, so Marianna to me sounds Russian, okay? But then, and I can believe that, or I can think that because initially Spain, the king wanted the missions built because he wanted in California, because there was provinces, right? When you think of it, you go Texas, and then the territory of New Mexico, Arizona, and California, these were provinces. And these provinces had these missions that were built in the Camino to avoid the encroachment by on the Pacific Coast from the Russians who were coming in fur trappers. And you find that in the movie, what's that one with Leonardo DiCaprio? The new one that just came out. No. This one's about the fur trappers Leonardo DiCaprio came where the bear attacked him and he got killed and he buried him. Evidence, right? Yeah. So when you look at that movie, that's a good rendition of that. So when you look at that, people say. So I remember somebody telling me, "Well, that's pretty gross, man." But it's a reality. It's a reality. And so after hearing, doing this research and seeing that, I go, "That's real. That's probably a good depiction of what they did." Because remember how they killed the Native American? They were just knocking out the Incas. And so when you reach out the histories, you got to look at 1880s, the outlawing of the Indian, the spiritual, the medicine, the spiritual. Yeah. The Sitting Bull, the whole thing on the Sitting Bull and the Wounded Knee, right? When you look at all of those histories, you'll find all of those, the laws, the creation of the laws, they're outlawing. Buffalo, they outlawed the Buffalo Hunt, they outlawed. And then if you look at those cowboy movies, when you start reading them, the whitest custard there, and then, so there's a whole thing that goes through it. So my thing is, what do you do with all this information? Well, it's up to the people that are gonna, do it. When you do it, you want to be able to find out how many people want to hear it, if they want to hear it, if they do not. But my thought is this: to create programs that would feature things like this and showcase them in places like when they send schools to go see the Alamo or come to the Austin or see Goliad or any state park or whatever. To have these kind of notices there describing that. Sometimes some of the rangers are really good at the information. They've done some of the stuff that, but I think that's the whole idea. So anyway, so that's kind of like the programming. And so let me do let's do a couple of these. I want to end with that one. I do some work on Friday nights with a country western band, and they like this song because I had never seen this person.
questions are answered, you know, I'd be really willing to share with you or try to answer what I can. But feel free to take one of these handouts that's over here. It does have references to some of the things we talked about. So, thank you, Jennifer.